Hi, I'm Rob from Livermore Live Music. This video is for a very special set of people that are known as gig entry proxy users. And what that means is that you can enter gigs into the live music system for any band or any venue. The proxy means you're doing that as a proxy for the system administrator. So let's get started and show you what that means. There are a couple of different live music systems. There's livermorelivemusic.com for Livermore, California. There's another one in Eugene, Oregon called Eugene Music Live, and there may be some other ones down the road. For this video, I'm going to use Livermore Live Music as the example, but the things I'm showing you would work the same for Eugene Music Live or for other venues, or other systems. So let's point our browser at the system. So I am going to use sandbox.livermorelivemusic.com. This is a special area where we can play around and create dummy data that doesn't affect the live system, but it looks just like livermorelivemusic.com. So I'm going to go to this. Again, you would go to livermorelivemusic.com or eugenemusiclive.com or what have you. So here we are on the system, and in order to do gig entry as a proxy gig entry user, you select Other, Proxy. And these options are for bands and venues that are allowed to enter their own gig information for that band or for that venue into the system. The other option is for you, because this is where you can enter any band and any venue gigs into the system. So we click on that and it brings up this login page, and we put in our username and the password that were given to you by the system administrator. If you don't have a username and a password for proxy entry, then you won't be able to do this. That's something you have to arrange with the system administrator. So this calls up a calendar, and you should be familiar with how Livermore Live Music or Eugene Music Live works. So this looks very much like the gig calendar in the system, except you'll notice it's got a different background color. It's kind of peach or orange colored, and that's to remind you that you're doing gig entry into the system. So this works very simply. I'm going to switch to April here. The simplest thing you can do is just add a gig on a date. So I'm going to pick one that doesn't happen to have one right now. So let's suppose April 10th. I'm going to click on this date, and this brings up the menu here, and you put in the band name. So let's suppose that this band is going to be Kinetic, and the venue is going to be Page Mill Winery. And the date is April 10th because that's what I clicked on. Put in the time. Let's suppose this is at 2 o'clock. Oops, I typed too fast. 2 o'clock p.m. And it's 3 hours long. Most gigs are. Click Submit. And there on April 10th is Connecticut Page Mill. And let's take a look at this real quick. So I'm going to open up another browser, and I'm going to go to sandbox.livermorelivemusic.com, but this would work in the live music system. And let's go take a look at gigs by venue. And we're going to look under Page Mill. And there's the gig that I just entered, Kinetic, on April 10th from 2 to 5 o'clock. Let's go back to where we're logged in as a gig entry user here. And let's do another quick example. Let's say that there's another gig on April 20th. So in this example, let's suppose that the band is Crawdad Republic, and let's suppose the venue is Three Steves, and let's suppose, I'm just making all this up, but let's say it starts at 8 o'clock. You'll notice that if the start time is any of these you see listed here, those are just shortcuts that make it faster to fill in the time. You can click on that. I could have typed 8 p.m. in here, but I just clicked on this little icon here. And let's suppose this one's only 2 hours long. So you pick the length of the gig from the drop down and click Submit. And now go back to the live system, and I have to refresh this page. And now we're looking at gigs by Three Steves, and there's the one that I just entered for Crawdad Republic on April 20th from 8 to 10 p.m. Now we'll go back to doing gig entry here. And so again, that's the simple way to put gigs into the system. A couple things to notice. I'm going to start another one here on April 12th. So the first thing is you can put any band that you want into the system. It doesn't have to be one from the drop-down list. So if I just click up here, this brings me a drop-down list that shows all the bands that are known to the system, and I can, you can pick one here. And if it is one of these bands, you should pick it from the drop-down list. That way you won't have a typo or misspell anything. But a lot of times gigs happen by bands that are out of town or they're brand new bands and they're not in the system yet. And so you can put anything you want in here. So let's suppose that there's a band called Joker's Joke. That's the name of the band. So I put that in there. And the same thing with venues. I can pick from the drop-down list of all the venues that are in the system, but I can put any venue that I want in here. So let's say there's a venue called Bubbles for Rent. I'm just making this up. But let's suppose that there's this venue and this band on April 12th at 2 p.m. and we'll submit it. And there on April 12th is the gig that I put in. So the important thing to understand is you should pick the band and the venue from the drop-down if you can, because then you won't type anything wrong. You won't have a typo in it. But a lot of times you have to put gigs in that aren't at a known, especially not known bands. Most of the venues in Livermore, most of the venues in Eugene are already in the system. But you can put any band and any venue in there that you want. Another important thing to notice here is, let's move to one that's got fewer gigs in. All right, so let's look at August here. Let's suppose that we want to change the date of a gig. That's easy to do. Let's suppose that this gig here, August 16th, isn't really on August 16th. Let's suppose that's a mistake and it's on August 17th. You just click on the date and change it to August 17th and move that gig from August 16th to August 17th, and there it is. By the way, a little shortcut, you can just drag this blue box to a different date. So let's move it to the 15th. And I'm not going to do it, but if I went back to the live system now and looked at gigs on August 15th, or I looked at Tim Gomes's gigs, or I looked at Wood Family gigs, this gig would have been moved to August 15th. There's another thing you can do. Let's suppose you have several gigs by the same band at the same venue in a row. Sometimes it's faster to make copies of that than to just enter it 3 times in a row. So I'm making up an example here, but let's say I'm going to start on August 28th. And let's suppose that the band Better Days is going to play at the venue Arroyo Cellars, and they're going to play on August 28th, 29th, and 30th, all at the same time. They're all 3 p.m., and they're all 1-hour gigs. So I start with the first one, and there it is on April 28th. Now, instead of clicking on the date, or instead of clicking on April 29th and entering all that again, I'll click on the gig itself, and I'll change the date, or I'll pick the date April 29th, so August 29th, and instead of moving, I will copy the gig. Now, the one that was on the 28th stays there, and there's another copy on the 29th, and now I'm going to pick that, and I'm going to change that date, not change it, but copy it to April, or August 30th. And so I put 3 gigs in a row in. So again, that's a convenience. Copying gigs is a convenience if you've got the same band playing at the same venue several times. They don't have to be all in a row. They could be in different months. That's pretty common. That's just a faster way to get the information in. There's a couple of other important things to notice here. So let's take a look at this one here. At Wood Family, they always call their Wednesday gigs Acoustic Wednesdays, and the way where that comes from is from this note field on the gig. So just for this example, on August 15th, I'm going to change the note from Acoustic Wednesdays to, I'll just make it all caps, Acoustic, and I'll abbreviate Wednesdays. So submit. So I changed the note on that gig. Now let's go take a look at the real system. And we're going to look at gigs by venue, and let's look at Wood Family and go back down on August 15th. And you'll notice that the note for that gig has been changed to what I just changed it to, Acoustic Wednesday. So I'll go back to where we're putting gigs in the entry calendar. That's what the note field is. You'll see it whether you're creating a brand new gig, there's the note, or whether you're modifying an existing gig, there's the note. And so that note is something that venues will name their series of music, music in the vineyards, or Wine Wednesdays, or Thursdays Almost Friday, or whatever. You should also use that note if the venue has a cover charge or a minimum drink, 2-drink minimum or something like that. What you want is for the users of the system who are looking around for gigs to go to see a note that tells them something about that gig at that venue. And so that's what the note field is for. Equally important, maybe more important, is this URL. That's where if there's a ticket that's required or a reservation that's required for that gig, you really need to put the URL for that ticket or that reservation in here. So let me show you what this looks like. I'm not going to do this. For this example, I've set up a venue, and I'm going to go to their mythical webpage called Joe's Place. And supposedly at Joe's Place, again, it doesn't really exist, but supposedly at Joe's Place, reservations are required for all their live music performances. And here is the URL, here's the web page that people go to in order to make reservations at Joe's Place for their live music. So what I'm going to do is highlight that in the browser and copy it. Control-C or Command-C on a Mac. Now, we'll go back to gig entry here. And let's make a gig here. I'm going to do it in April. So let's make a gig on April 4th, and we'll say the band is No Such Band, and they're going to be at Joe's Place. And on April 4th, because that's when I clicked on it, and we'll say it's at 5 p.m. And I'm going to take that URL that I copied from their reservation page, and I'm going to paste it in here. So there it is, and I'll submit it. Now we'll go back to the live system, and we gotta refresh this page. And let's look at Joe's Place. There it is. And here's the gig that I just entered, No Such Band on April 4th. And it created a See Also link, and when the user clicks on that, it opens up a new browser tab or a new window and takes them to the URL where they can make those reservations or buy those tickets. So if you're putting gigs in where reservations are required or where tickets are required, it's really important that you carefully find the URL where the user can make those reservations or buy the tickets for that gig on that day at that venue and put that URL in. And I think I've shown you everything you need to know to put gigs in. It's really important that you go back and check your work, go back to the live system from time to time, and make sure that the gigs that you're putting in are showing up and appearing to the users of the system the way that you want them, that they're in the right place, the right time, they have the right notes. If there's a See Also link, that's being filled in correctly.